National recruiting analyst Alan True is here to help us break down all these classes. We'll start with the reigning Big Ten champ, Michigan, Alan. A group of 17 commits highlighted by five-star quarterback Jaden Davis. And Alan, we've been waiting for Michigan's recruiting to match that success on the field. Now that it's happening, what grade are you giving Jim Harbaugh in his 2024 class?
Yeah, let me preface this by saying that I'm kind of an easy grader. I'm the professor you wanted in college because I grade on an easy scale. But I think you have to give Michigan an A, right? You have the #1 class in the Big Ten, #1 class in the country. People, especially Michigan fans, were a little bit disappointed in last year's finish after they had a great season the year before. But after two good seasons in a row, 2 college football playoff appearances, this is the class that Wolverine fans have been waiting for. So you have the #1 class in the country, and we understand that that may not hold all the way until signing day, but even without that, it's a great class. You have a bell cow in quarterback Jaden Davis. You've put some really strong skill position players around him like Brady Prieskorn, Jordan Marshall. You've put some big offensive linemen in front of him, and I think the best thing about this class is that there's still a lot of potential there when you look at who they're bringing in for official visits come June.
Behind Michigan in the rankings right now, Allen, currently sitting 3rd in the country, is Ohio State. They have 13 commitments, including Mylan Graham, Jeremiah Smith, the #1 rated receiver in this class. The rivalry is alive and well. What grade would you give the Buckeyes so far in this cycle?
See, I think some Ohio State fans might not consider this an A until they're ahead of Michigan, and I understand the rivalry. But in my class, you don't look at your neighbor's paper. You just focus on what you're doing. And so solely on that, I will give Ohio State an A because it's a top 5 class, top 3 class. And once again, they're strong at the positions you expect them to be strong at. You mentioned that wide receiver class. It seems like you can just put it down every single year that several of the top receivers in the country are going to commit to Ohio State and sign with them. And then you have a quarterback like Aaron Nolan in the class to get them the football. The defensive class has to catch up a little bit, but just like I said with Michigan, when you look at who they have coming in for officials, guys like KJ Bolden, Sammy Brown, Dominic McKinley, those guys, I think they have a lot of potential still left on the defensive side of the ball. I think it's going to be interesting, too, that Ohio State and Michigan are going head-to-head for several guys, some of them from the state of Ohio, like Aaron Scott and Bryce West, and I think whoever wins out on those battles, or maybe a defensive end like Marquise Lightfoot, that could kind of flip around Ohio State and Michigan or keep the Wolverines ahead of the Buckeyes. So pay attention to a couple of those battles.
We'll go to Wisconsin now, where Luke Fickell is off and running. The Badgers sit 23rd in the overall rankings, 6th in the conference with 8 commits. And Fickell really tapping into the Midwest. He's got commitments from in the state, Illinois, Pennsylvania, but also expanding the footprint, going to Texas for a quarterback. So what grade are you giving his first full cycle with the Badgers?
Right now, I'm going to give them a B+. I think it's a good class. I think there's still potential here for it to get up to an A if June and into the fall goes really, really well. I think they've done a good job of, like you've said, attacking different states that they had connections to. I think when you look at it, it's still a classic Wisconsin class. This looks like the type of Wisconsin class that this program's been built on. When you look at 2 talented tight ends, you look at big offensive linemen, one from in the state like Derek Jensen, you look at guys in the front 7 like Thomas Heiberger who fit the mold of what Wisconsin has recruited at outside linebacker. So I think they've done a good job of coming in and breathing some new life into Badger recruiting, but also not straying too far away from the formula that's made Wisconsin into a perennial Big Ten West contender.
Staying in the Big Ten West, we have Northwestern. Allen, we know the obstacles that Coach Fat Fitzgerald and that whole staff they have when it comes to recruiting, and they're sitting 10th right now in the Big Ten. What color Sharpie is Professor Alan True breaking out for the Northwestern Wildcats?
I'm going to give them a B-, and I know Northwestern is probably not accustomed to too many B's on those report cards, but I think it's a good class so far, and I think that they've gone up to a B- in the last few weeks here. They had an early official visit weekend in May, came out of that with several commits, including Peyton Stewart, who was a big grab at offensive tackle. They beat Wisconsin and several other programs for Dylan Johnson, landed several recruits out of the state of Michigan. That's been kind to them. And once again, I think this is a class that still has upside in it. They've really targeted quarterbacks out of high school. They've had to go into the portal several times to land themselves a quarterback. They would love to get one out of high school and develop one. Aiden Glover is a guy that I think ultimately could end up in this class. Several other big official visitors coming in June. So I think Pat Fitzgerald and his crew are trending towards a really, really good class here.
Before we go a little bit more in depth on the rest of these schools, let's take a look at your complete report card here, Alan. I see 5 A's, 5 B's, and 4 C's. So I think you're right. You're pretty good, a pretty fair grader here. All that kind of checks out. But we have 10 more classes to run through. So let's start with the teams sitting 3rd and 4th in the Big Ten. Penn State, 7th nationally with 14 commits. Minnesota, 13th nationally with 14 commits. And Alan, you're giving them both A's. Why is that?
Well, first with Penn State, when you have the numbers, again, you don't look at the fact that Ohio State and Michigan are ahead of them. Penn State is the number 7 class in the country, so a top 10 class. They are continuing what they did last year when they were really strong on the offensive line. I think that's an important position for them. They're doing that again in this class. They were able to go into Wisconsin, a state that they haven't recruited a ton over the years, maybe a little bit here and there, and got 3 commits out of the state of Wisconsin. A couple of big gets from inside the state as well. So I think with them positioned as a top 10 class, have to give Penn State an A. Minnesota exceeding expectations. Several schools have come in and tried to poach some of their top in-state recruits. It's a really good year in the state of Minnesota. They've been able to keep a couple of those guys at home. So when you see Minnesota up there at number 4 and number 10 in the Big Ten West, it's hard to give them anything but an A, because I think a couple of those in-state guys may have been able to hold their recruitment out for longer, and Minnesota got them in the class early.
Iowa and Purdue are up next, 2 programs with different recruiting staffs and different approaches to how they go about recruiting. Iowa with an A, and you've got Purdue with a B+. What do you think of both of these programs so far in the 2024 cycle?
Yeah, Iowa's one where I think their ranking may even be a little bit deceiving, because if you look at where 24/7's in-house rankings has some of their recruits, we're a little bit higher on some of their commits than others. We really like their linebacker class led by Derek Weisskopf and Cam Buffington. And so I think Iowa has a really, really strong class right now. And they have several guys coming in June who I think can add to this class and raise that further. I think they will give Minnesota a good run for that top class in the Big Ten West. And then Purdue, I thought they had maybe the sneaky best class, kind of the sleeper class of the Big Ten a year ago. They're continuing that into this year. They don't do it with a ton of flash right now. They're not looking for, they even closed off spring practice. I think that kind of tells you about Ryan Walters' mindset right now. But they've done really well in the states of Tennessee and Texas, and they have their quarterback in the class in Marcos Davila. So I think that's big to have that foundation of having your signal caller in the class.
We'll go to the 2 East Coast programs now, Rutgers and Maryland. Greg Schiano still in that rebuilding process with the Scarlet Knights. His 2024 class just inside the top 30 at number 29, 8 commits there. And then Maryland trying to build off an 8-win season. The Terps sitting outside the top 50 with 4 commits. Alan, you're giving Rutgers a B and Maryland a C-. Why those 2 grades?
Yeah, so first with Rutgers being inside the top 30 right now, I think that's a really good class. And they've been Jersey heavy in other years, which they still are. They've been East Coast heavy, but they've been able to come over further into the Midwest and have some good wins in this class. Their top commit, Gabriel Winovich, is just a testing monster who has put up some huge numbers at combines and other events the last 2 years. Versatile athlete who I think can do a lot for them. Maryland, I think that when you give some of these lower grades, the C-, those teams I consider, they only have a couple of commits in the class, but some of those programs still have a lot of ability to build the class. We're not even into June yet. A lot of them have visits still coming up. Maryland has some really, really highly ranked visitors coming in. And so that's why I was maybe a little bit easier on the bottom of the Big Ten, because understanding right now it's May and a lot of these classes will be filled out and given different grades by the end of June and July. And Maryland is one where you look at their official visit list coming in, there's some really, really highly regarded players coming to campus.
Matt Rhule has the Huskers recruiting pretty well so far in his first true recruiting class. They are 30th nationally, and Indiana, meanwhile, is outside the top 50. You gave these a B- for the Huskers and a C for the Hoosiers. How do you feel about these 2 schools heading into the summer, Alan?
Well, I think Nebraska last year finished with the top class in the Big Ten West, and so this one's not there right now. You'd like to get it there, and that's why they were not graded higher. But the thing I like about both of these classes is I like the quarterbacks in both groups. Nebraska was just able to flip in-state quarterback Daniel Kalen from Missouri, very talented, smart player who's had a good career at Bellevue West. And then Indiana picked up Tim Carpenter, who I loved at the recent spring events, a big athletic prospect. And so I think that's where the fans of both of those schools can hang their hats right now, is that they both have talented quarterbacks to help lead this class. And I think other commits will follow, particularly on the offensive side of the ball.
And we'll finish up with the bottom two classes in the conference, Michigan State and Illinois. 2 C grades here from you, Alan, for programs right next to each other in the national rankings. The Spartans 65th, the Illini 66th. Why do you think these programs have struggled so far in the 2024 cycle?
Well, I think that, it could be a little bit philosophical. I think they both also have larger official visit lists in June. Michigan State had a couple of defections out of the class, so both of them only sit right now with 3 commits. But when you look at those official visit lists coming in, both have a chance to do really well in June. Michigan State has some heavy hitters coming to campus. 4-star linebacker Kamar Mathudi. They'll have a chance to get 4-star wide receiver Nick Marsh back on campus. He was once committed to them. They get him back in the class. That immediately boosts that grade way up. Same thing with Illinois, where you look at how many in-state visitors they have coming in. Guys like Darian Dupree, guys like Luke Williams, highly ranked guys who are still considering Illinois. I think they've done a good job of building relationships with those kids, getting them on campus for unofficial visits, and now they have them coming in for officials. And so they just haven't been able to close some of those guys out early, but both of those programs, I think when you look at their official visit list for June, there's reason for optimism.